Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily guide to mastering current affairs with clarity, structure and UPSC relevance. It's July 27th, 2025 and today's edition features two deep dive articles tailored specifically for Mains 2025. First, we revisit the India-US trade talks on genetically modified crops. Then, we take a stock of the insurance sector in the country. Next, in our Prelims 2026 Focused Simplified section, we will be bringing crisp updates on the new NALSA scheme, school safety audits, Supreme Court's direction on old vehicles, nanofertilizer sales, and the prestigious Sansad Ratna awards. So let's begin. Hi guys, welcome back again. I hope you all are doing well on this Sunday and I hope your preparation is going fine. We'll be starting with the very first article today, which is focused on the recent talks between US and India to have better trade relations between our countries. But in the same, we have some various issues which are focused on improving the trade relations between the two countries. So here, we are going to pick up this article from the Indian Express, which is focusing on the deliberations and the debates between India and US on the inclusion of genetically modified crops between the trade deal. So here, we are going to understand how this is actually very important, because recently also you have seen how the UK and Indian free trade agreement has come into our focus and how that is extremely important, especially when we consider India's interests, when we consider how our farmers will be getting market access in the UK, how our industrialists will be able to sell the products in the UK. And on similar lines, we also need to have comprehensive trade deals with the USA. And here, Donald Trump is actually a very important factor. So we are going to understand what those factors are, especially in this particular topic, and we have to also try to understand this from the perspective of a syllabus. Firstly, in prelims, we need to know about the economic relations between the various countries, what are the various concepts involved within the same. Also, most importantly, we have the topics between GS2 and 3. Firstly, we have to understand what are the policies of developed countries like the US and how they affect our interest. Second, we also need to understand this article from the significance of Indian economy, especially because we have wide subjects of agriculture in the syllabus. And at the end of the day, we also need to understand the various awareness in the fields of biotechnology here. This is concerning the genetic engineering of crops. Let us understand how this is taking place through the ancient maize, right? Now you all have looked upon this particular crops in your day-to-day lives. But when you have to understand the origin of maize over a period of time, actually the very primitive or the ancient maize used to look like this. And look at how few corns we have on this. Now, our ancient ancestors realized that if we were to have more corns on this same maize, we need to look for other kinds of maize which have more corns. So that is why we will be always looking at better varieties of crops, right? So that we can have more production of the same with maybe the same inputs such as seeds, fertilizers, water, money at the end of the day. That is why we generally went on to, selective breeding and scientific selection and also cross-pollination between various varieties of maize crops. So we generally got the modern corn right now where we have so many kernels on the same. Now this is actually via selective breeding here. But we can actually take this a step forward. How? Because right now we have to also make our modern maize secure from any pests, any diseases. So that is why I will be again going into the nature. I will be finding some varieties which are actually insect resistant, or I will be maybe finding some bacteria or some other microorganisms who have some genes that I can insert into my modern maize crop. So this is how genetical engineering is working in the real life. That is, I have to look for a particular crop or a particular bacteria which is maybe pest resistant, which is maybe herbicide resistant, right? And I will be isolating the gene or the DNA segments from that bacteria. What I will be doing with that, I will be inserting that into a plant tissue. I will be trying to multiply the cells of the plant, and these cells will be having the DNA of that bacteria, of that crop variety, which is actually much more better. And then I will be trying to get a whole crop like this. This is exactly how GM crops are made. These are actually those plants whose DNA has been altered using genetic engineering techniques. Mainly, we need to have better varieties of crops so that we can have better pest resistance. We also need to have less and fewer chemicals used, because chemicals are causing a lot of soil pollution. So these crops require less chemicals, and also they can give us higher yields. Apart from this usual agricultural benefits, we also use GM crops right now for industrial research and development, so that how we can actually ensure food security going forward, because that genetically verified crops, they actually give us higher yields, which will be ensuring food security going forward. Next, we also are trying to use this for non-food purposes too. For example, say we can also have ethanol blending, right? Now imagine the sugarcane crop that we are using for ethanol blending in petrol. Now this sugarcane crop is a food crop, right? And if we are diverting the food resources to non-food uses, then there can be a food security issue. And genetically modified crops can solve these issues by actually giving us higher yields. They can actually give us higher content of ethanol, and this is how these are actually the crops of the future according to some experts. So that is why, please do let me know what is the answer of this 2012 PYQs with reference to the prospects for genetically engineering plants. And let me tell you, I will be putting various PYQs in between the discussion. This is why, because UPSC prelims and also mains focus a lot on your syllabus and also on the PYQ themes which have already come. Whenever UPSC examiners are going to set question papers for all of you, they are going to have your PYQs in front of them, because they actually serve as an excellent inspiration for framing future questions. So that is why, do not skip these questions. You please solve this and you let me know what is the answer. I'm trying to solve this 2021 PYQ for you all. In India, as of now, we only have one genetically modified crops which is open for commercial cultivation. That means everyone can actually cultivate it, and generally farmers do the same with reference to BT cotton. So ball gourd 1 and ball gourd 2 are actually the genetically modified versions of cotton crops which are actually much more advanced than the traditional ones. So this is where the answer here will be actually B, that is developing genetically modified crop plants. Now, everything is fine, right? We have just looked into what are the amazing benefits here, but there are some concerns which are extremely, concerning. Firstly, we have to talk about the health risk. When we are trying to insert a foreign gene in our traditional crops, we are trying to alter the genetic composition of that particular crop. So this can have some unsaid human risks, right? Even plant and animal risks over a period of time. Firstly, we do not yet know about the long-term effects of genetically modified crops, because this is only around 50-60-year-old technology. We still do not have a lot of crops in the market, especially in our country. And what will be the long-term benefits on our internal body? You must have heard about a very important term known as bioaccumulation and biomagnification. This is actually are present in our bodies due to the various food crops, or say the meat that we consume on a day-to-day basis. So this is why the long-term effects are not yet clear. Also, the new genes on a short-term basis actually cause some allergies or reactions in various people. Next, we also are using, advanced technologies here. We are trying to isolate the genes, and here these kind of genes can maybe lead to antibiotic resistance. The normal medicines that we use right now are actually being weakened. Why? Because we generally do not follow the doctor's prescription. We take the drugs or the medicines as per our convenience, our moods, right? Remember the last time you had fever? Did you take the medicines for a full course of 2 to 3 days as advised by your doctor? Maybe it is not, because over a period of time, these kind of habits or lifestyles are being changed in our daily lives. And that is why, this antibiotic resistance or the medicines are not that effective what it used to be around 5 to 6 years ago. So this is also something that can be propagated using this kind of crops, according to various scientists. And also, if you can look into, this kind of report, The genetically modified organisms here in the crops actually ranked 5 in food concerns among global shoppers. This was actually a study which was done, and these global shoppers, they ranked the risks that come from the food chain. Firstly, they say that okay, pesticide in food is actually very bad. Then contaminated food ingredients, also irradiation of fruits and vegetables, fruit preservatives, and then you have within the top 5 your genetically modified crops. That means people are actually not yet confident of the efficacies and the benefits of the same. Next, there are environmental risks of the emergence of super weeds and super bugs. We use weedicides to get rid of weeds, right? And that is where, if due to genetically modified crops, right now the weeds become too much powerful that you cannot eliminate them even using the genetically modified crops, because right now they have mutated, they've adapted to the GM crops. What happens then? Then we have to maybe take the GM crops to the next level, which will require a lot of losses, a lot of money, and maybe the farmers will be losing at the end. Also, superbugs are those kind of, say, advanced and mutated bacteria and bacteriophages which also actually tries to enter the food chain, and if they actually enter, this can also lead to the disruption of human health. Next, it can also target the insects, for example say butterfly, who actually depend on the plants for the crops for pollination. So maybe the GM crops may not have too much seeds and too much of, say, various pollinating features, and maybe the butterflies and the other insects who depend on them, they will be dying off, and this can actually lead to a catastrophe, a chain of events or chain of destruction. Also, GM may also replace the natural varieties, and maybe over a period of time we will be losing the natural varieties that we generally found in the nature. And at the end of the day, there are ethical concerns, because whenever we are actually playing with the genes, whenever we are trying to modify them, we are actually playing God, because we are trying to alter the basic component of the living life, that is the DNA. If we are doing the same, who are actually doing it? Maybe the big private companies, and they can have control over each and every aspect of the farmers of our food chain. That is not a very good thing to go with. Next, the farmers will over a period of time become increasingly dependent if we were trying to legalize all the kinds of GM crops. Also, there are risks of biopiracy, just like the movie piracy that you may have experienced, that some companies and their patents and their GM crops and the formula of the same can be leaked online, or say can be linked to various other companies, and they will be losing the same, they will be losing the money. And this is where we have to keep this thing in mind. And if you look at the US, in the US, 80% of the packaged food are actually having genetically modified origins. And if we can also talk about, the Americans who believe, on the acceptance of genetically modified foods, you see there is not a particular agreement between them. That means still now we are actually far away from the approval of the GM crops and for final usage. When we are talking about approval of the same, we have to talk about the government of India right now, because we have a regulatory framework for GM crops in the country, because it is actually very important as we have looked into the concerns. That is why in India, there are actually various key regulatory bodies. Firstly, we have the Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee, who actually looks into the global biotech developments, and they try to recommend the same for our Indian development or indigenous development of the biotechnology sector in the country by partnering with various institutions, private companies, universities and colleges. Next, we also have a review committee on genetic manipulation, because whenever, for example, see if I am a company who is formulating a genetically modified crops, I would want it to be released to the public as soon as possible. But the government always will be intervening in between. It will be looking into the costs and benefits. It will be looking into consulting with the various experts and the citizens. And this is exactly how this review committee will be working, using various experts. Next, perhaps the most important one, and also covered in the previous Analyst, right? This is actually the GEAC, or Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, who is actually having the final say with reference to GM crop release. In the comments below, you let me know under which department or ministry this is functioning. And at the end of the day, we have various state departments of biotechnology And here, these are actually ensuring state level compliance with reference to national guidelines on biotechnologically modified crops. So here, when we talk about the GM crop status in the country, we have to understand that we have only as of now approved BT cotton for commercial release, commercial cultivation. We have approved the GM mustard, but that is also in a trial basis right now, that is not released commercially, right? And it is yet to receive the signal. With reference to BT brinjal, corn, soya, all of which are food crops, we are still yet looking into the various technicalities. And Indian government is actually very cautious, despite the fact that the GM crop market is increasing over a period of time. It will be giving us very good benefits, especially for the farmers and maybe even for the startups, because India is actually within the top 5 countries when we talk about the cultivation of GM crops by area. So you can understand, if India is having the rank within top 5 by only cultivating BT cotton, you can only wonder if we are actually trying to commercially release BT brinjal, mustard and various other crops, it would be our own interest and our own profit over a period of time. Maybe India can actually come within the top 3, even the first position here. Now, coming to the main news here, why is GM crops a hot topic between India and US trade talks? Donald Trump right now has been very aggressive with reference to the policies he wants to be approved from his end or from his own country's interests. Now, we have looked into the concerns. We have also looked into that the GESE has not yet approved the various other crops. It has found the BT cotton safe, and that is why we are trying to cultivate it. And maybe there are obviously various reasons due to which we are not yet confident of the various other crops. And India is also arguing the same, when it is actually having conversations and negotiations right now with the US. So that means that India is not yet ready. We are not yet ready to release the GM crops or accept the crops from any other countries too. So this is exactly what the US is telling, because it is very interested to push the maize varieties and the soya varieties of genetically modified crops in India. But it is not yet permitted under Indian regulations. If you cannot cultivate something in the domestic country, how you can import it from abroad? Right? So that is why US is demanding an open agricultural market, which will be allowing their own genetically modified crops. They are calling also our own system, our own laws and patents, very opaque and very slow, because we actually love to take our time. We actually love to understand what will be the long-term consequences. Instead of only looking at money, we have to also take concern with reference to environment and ethical reasons. So that is why India is kind of positing that we have only BT cotton right now. When we are talking to the US, we are trying to say that we have only approved one crop. And we are also trying to formalize the food standards when we talk about including the GM crops as ingredients in restaurants or various other food stalls. For these, the FSSAI, the Food Safety Standards Authority of India, is also looking into what would be the, kind of, say, costs and benefits for the consumers if we are using the GM crops in food in our country. And according to various recent researches, has also been found that despite we have not approved various crops, under the GM regime, we also have various instances of some items, of some food items which have genetically modified crops, right? Maybe the supply chain is coming from the US or various other countries where these particular crops are legally commercialized. So that is also a cause of concern which FSSAI is looking into. And we have also communicated the same here. But here, we generally have to understand that US right now always have looked into having superior control over military, over technology. When we also talk about technology, US is actually always arm twisting India into various agreements. For example, anything related to artificial intelligence. Here is also they are trying to arm twist us into the biotechnological scenario, because they actually want furthermore profits. But we have various threats to our farmers right now. We need to talk about the environmental and biodiversity risks. We also need to talk about the export risks, because the European Union actually is very cautious regarding genetically modified crops. They do not encourage these kind of things, because they are also on the same page like India, that we have some concerns related to environment and ethics. That is why we do not try to actually jeopardize our export relations with the European Union. Because if the European Union sees that we are also using genetically modified crops right now, we will be losing a very big market, because the EU is actually a very big market for our Indian farmers. So our farmers can lose at the very end. That is why the best path forward in this entire debate to ban or not is to adopt a balanced approach. We cannot ever, as future bureaucrats, tell that we should be straight away banning something or we should be allowing something. We should be always having a nuanced stance. Firstly, you can actually quote a very interesting report that, if you are having more genetically modified crops, this can also have good benefits for the environment, because biotech crops actually reduce the carbon emissions, because maybe we can engineer the crops in such a way. We will be inserting some genes in such a way that we can use, we will be generally releasing less methane emissions, because methane emissions is actually a very big contributor to global warming, and one of the largest sources of the same comes from agriculture and mainly rice cultivation. So maybe we can have some rice variants which release less methane, right? And this will be equivalent to removing a lot of equivalent carbon dioxide from our vehicle sector, construction sector, and so on. So this is actually a study which has been done in the US for the matter. That is why we have to adopt a balanced approach. We have to avoid the EU export bans that they can do if we try to agree with the US right now. So that is why if India wants to at all allow the GM crop market access to the US in our market, we have to be extremely cautious that those varieties or those crops which we trade with the EU, for example basmati rice, wheat, we should not be allowing genetically modified crops within the same. Next, we also need to have price caps on the GM seeds, because they are extremely costly if we look at the markets. Next, we also should be banning the herbicide tolerant GM crops, because it can have negative consequences, because according to studies it has been seen with reference to lessening the use of chemicals, they actually increase the use of chemicals here. Also, if we are trying to have genetically modified crops, let us actually look at the beneficial features. We can have vitamin A fortified rice. That is fine, because it can be helping even in our public distribution system, the ration system, the food security scheme. And at the end of the day, we have to also demand a technological transfer. That means we must be telling the US that please teach us how you are making the GM crops if you want to sell GM crops in our country. Because we also want to develop over a period of time, we also want to become a major hub. So you cannot only take all the benefits, you have to give some of them to us. And in this aspect, you see, in 2019, there was actually a question on the aspect of biotechnology improve our living standards of the farmers. This can be actually one point within the same. Also, practice this means question, let me know in the answers so that I can actually look into it, maybe suggest some improvements. Now on to the next one. Guys, in this article, we are going to look into the insurance sector of the country, because according to a recent report by IBAI and McKinsey, the insurance sector in the country is poised to give a big boost by 2030. So let us understand via the perspective of economic growth from prelims and maybe from the perspective of GS3, inclusive growth. Because when we are talking about insurance, it is actually trying to insure your income, your health, anything related to any other accidents, disasters, and so on. Insurance is actually kind of a contract between an insurance company such as the LIC and a policy holder such as you, right? And here the insurer pays the policy for any kind of financial losses, right? So this is how the basic concept of insurance is, and generally this kind of definitions are extremely important in your answers. So try to give this a kind of a structured insurance definition in your answers. And when we talk about the insurance regime, this is dictated by one act, that is the Insurance Act of 1938, which is actually a pre-independence act. So this is the act which the government has modified again and again, and this is trying to tell what are the various kinds of insurance that we have. Generally, we have general insurance, which insures you regarding your life, right? We also have the medical insurance. We have types of cyber insurance. We also have third-party insurance, and there are n number of insurance types in the country. So all of them actually trace back to this act. Also, this is telling you how the insurance company should be operating, what their structure should be, how the funds of the policy holders are held safely and securely, what are the various norms of investments they can do in the various markets. So all of these things are mentioned. And at the end of the day, this act is also regulating the insurance agents. You all maybe have gotten one call from them telling you to take some insurance. So it is also looking into how they should be operating, what their compensation should be, what kind of taxes they also should be paying, because at the end of the day, these agents are also human beings, right? They also want to earn some commissions based on selling the schemes. Maybe you do not require, maybe someone else requires. And if they actually sell insurance, they will be getting some compensation. And we'll be looking into it how we have some issues related to them also. But when we look into the main regulatory authority, it is the IRDAI, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India. And here we have to look into some important and interesting facts here. Firstly, when we talk about India, Indian insurance markets is actually growing at around 5% in the last financial year. So this is quite, handsome. But over a period of time, we have to understand we are only between the top 10th countries when we talk about the market access. But when we also look at various interesting facts, for example, insurance penetration in the country is actually low, and insurance penetration is actually the total premiums divided by your country's GDP. So this is how we find that in India, this is only at 4.2%, which is quite low than the global average of 7%. That means that in India, we have less premiums paid. If we are paying less premiums, that means less number of people are insured. And if less number of people are insured, they do not have proper financial inclusion or, a proper mechanism to cope up the financial losses in cases of any negative consequences. Insurance always gives you some assured money, right? If you fulfill some, obligations and some criteria, you will be getting the money. If you're, for example, say are facing some medical issues or facing a job loss with reference to cyber security risks, your insurer is there for you. And that is why if the insurance penetration is low, that means that the number of Indians who avail of insurance services are low. Also look at insurance density. It is nothing but the total number of premiums divided by our total population. So this means that in India, we have only $91 as the average premium paid. Compare this to the global rate, which is around at $874. So this means that the market, also the private companies in India, are actually not looking at too many clients. They do not have too many profits when we compare to the global average. While this is, a kind of a negative news, but this is also a kind of a positive thing, because it tells that the market in the country, the insurance market in the country, is not yet fully developed. That means the government of India has a better potential to develop it over a period of time with proper policies, right? And also when we talk about the total number of insurance schemes, the N number of insurance types, the most popular types of insurance in the country are actually life insurance and health insurance. Life insurance only covers around 76% of the policies. That means we have the scope and opportunity to develop other kinds of insurance too in the country. Also, according to the Swiss Re report, it will be becoming 6th largest by 2032. So that is why we have to understand also when we compare between the emerging markets and the global markets, Indian insurance sector is growing at a faster pace. Now, when we look at the recent article today, it is talking about the present scenario of the insurance sector, giving us various important data. And it is actually bringing a very important term known as a gross written premium, which is actually the total premium collected by the insurance companies before deductions. The deductions are various other technical conditions, but yeah, this simply means that if I am taking some insurance scheme, how much insurance premium I am paying to my company, right? This is the main gross written premium. So in other terms, you can tell this is actually the total market value of the insurance market, which is right now at 11.2 lakh crore in 2024, right? And this market value is telling you how much business they are doing, the companies are doing. Also, it can help us understand the market structures too, because we have to understand this report right now, the McKinsey report is telling that over a period of time, by 2030, this 11.2 lakh crore will become 25 lakh crore. That means an increase of more than 100%, right, in the next 5 years. That means that over a period of time, maybe insurance market is growing very, very fast because firstly, the first condition is that people are right now becoming aware of the need for financial security. We are right now trying to be more and more inclusive when we talk about insurance schemes. We have so many insurance schemes from the government side, right? We have the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, we have various other n number of schemes given by the various ministries, even by the state governments in the country. You can let me actually some of the examples in the comments below. And this is why over a period of time, that is why this report is finding we have a good potential. And of this growth that is going to come, retail segment is driving around the maximum number of growth. This means 90% of the people who are demanding insurance, they come from the retail sector. That means people like us, people like you, people like your mom and dad, your relatives and various other peoples. So that is how we have to understand. If we try to market the products properly, we will be getting further and better insurance sector. And mainly, there are some curious reasons as to why the insurance sector is booming right now. Firstly, due to rising medical cost, as you can see, over a period of time, the healthcare products and the services are skyrocketing. In recent times, you definitely have heard that our inflation rate is going down. It is around at 2% right now. But what happened to the health inflation? What happened to the inflation that you're paying, right? In cases of buying medicines and so on, that has skyrocketed. That is actually in double figures. So the main aspect of low inflation right now, the low CPI, is due to low food inflation, correct? But on the other hand, these health services are increasing, over a period of time. Also, when we talk about the road accidents, India is actually at rank 1. When we talk about the global, road death rate per 10,000 kilometers, India is at 250. And that is why we are now realizing the importance of having an insurance. Because if you're having a health insurance, your insurance company will be covering all the costs if you are trying to meet those kind of conditions. Also, if you are facing some accidents, may God forbid that, you also will be getting the money for the same if you are insured. So that is why this insurance sector is growing fast in the country. So this was one reason from the retail side, the people like us. But also, there are various other big groups who are buying the insurance. Maybe this is the one group which is the ultra-rich group, which is people who are having more than 8.5 crore plus net worth. They want high coverage, right? But only around 30% have it, correct? So that is why they are trying to demand more of insurance schemes to actually secure their further other income streams too and their companies too. On the other hand, the mass market, the lower and the middle classes, they actually talk about medical insurance, their family, child education and so on. But on the other hand, we also have various other small businesses who are joining, because earlier, some businesses, some MSMEs, some companies in the country only used to take insurance whenever some client requested or there were some legal requirements. You can take the example of a car, right? If you do not have any legal obligation to buy insurance for your car, would you buy that, right? Because it is costing you some money. But any logical and sensible person should be buying insurance for their personal needs, and more so for their business needs too, because you never know in any business what would be the current market condition. That is why, according to this report also, many business people are getting aware, and maybe this market will be going by 3x by 2030. That means we can actually add a 2.8 lakh crore to the market only by taking insurance from textiles, automobile, pharma and industrial goods and various other sectors too. But there are various issues in this particular sector. We cannot deny these kind of issues. Firstly, the government policies of taxation, generally implying of around 18% of GST on the insurance products, is actually quite costly for the lower and the middle income classes. Imagine if you are buying any health insurance policy which is costing you 10,000 rupees without GST. So add 18% here, it will be increasing your cost. And you know that GST has so many slabs. It starts from around 5%, it goes up to around 28%. Generally, those 5% slabs are those, for those goods and services which are actually essential, or these are actually very important in your day-to-day life. So what do you think? That GST should be reduced from 18 to 5% or not, right? Also, when we talk about the public sector insurance companies in the country, we are talking about LIC. By the way, guys, LIC is actually, operated under the President of India. It is under the Indian government. So it is actually said the President of India is actually the largest investor in the Indian stock market, because LIC actually invests in so many companies all across the country, and that is why their capital is sometimes less, because they actually have made so many investments here and there. They generally find less capital. And if you talk about the government insurance companies, if you take everyone together, the overall capital is quite less what it should have been. Also, we have to talk about the agents right now. Mainly the public sector companies, the government insurance companies, they have various agents, the LIC agents, for example. Now, these agents, for example, have sold 10,000 rupees of insurance in 1 month. Now, what the government has said, that if you are delivering any commission-based service, any professional service, maybe you will be having to give 10% as tax, or this is known as tag deductors at source. So, when this agent will be getting the money from the LIC, this person will be getting only 9,000 as of now. And the extra 1,000 that person can claim only when he or she is filing his or her own ITR return at the end of the financial year. That means this 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever these agents are selling, their money is stuck for some period of time. Maybe also they are losing the interest on that money too. That is why this TDS is actually kind of an issue for those agents. Also, if you talk about the insolvencies or generally the losses these companies are facing, the public insurance companies are facing, this has run to the amount of 26,000 crores, which is actually a huge loss. Also, in India, we are having a very peculiar issue of excluding some people from the insurance schemes. There are so many peoples in the country who take insurance by themselves. Maybe the private people, or say the people who are employed in the private sector, they buy their own insurance policies. The central government people, they have their own central government schemes. The ESIS or various other central and state governments employees, they also have their own insurance scheme. With reference to various other insurance schemes, some people are covered automatically. What happened to the people who are not covered? These are 40.5% people who are not covered under any insurance scheme. These are actually known as the missing middle people who are not covered. Mainly they are belonging from the migrant population. They belong to the slum dwellers. They belong to the extreme poor rural areas. So these people needs to be included. Also, when we talk about these sections of the population, micro insurance is a very important term for them, because according to the government classification, any insurance policy where the sum assured is less than 2 lakh rupees, that classifies as micro insurance. It means that we have the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, we have the various other government schemes, which if it is having less than 2 lakh rupees of coverage, that means they are the micro insurance scheme. Firstly, people are not aware of this kind of schemes. We do not have proper awareness at the block level, at the village level. That is why these schemes are not being adopted at the rate that the government would generally want them to be adopted as. Also, whenever we are looking at any disasters, for example, take the case of Fasal Bima Yojana. Right? Now, Fasal Bima Yojana is not a scheme which is run entirely by the government. Government will be giving some contributions, while the final scheme will be operating by the companies or the various banks, right? For example, there is a company ABC, and there is a farmer who faced some losses due to hailstorm in the various parts of the country. So that farmer needs to actually submit some evidences, some proof, and involve in some paperwork. This is why during some disasters, when actually people need the insurance the most, these kind of companies, they do too much of checks, they do too much of verifications and so on. This makes the people actually very antagonistic regarding the insurance policies. And also, we can relate this with reference to the delay in claims and various discounts, because you have to understand these insurance companies, they operate on this kind of principle or that probability that life will be going on as usual, right? But in any case, in any unusual case, this insurance companies has to give the claim, give the money. There have been so many delays. IRDAI over a period of time has actually prodded various big companies, insurance companies, even the LIC in various cases, to give the claims to the people at the same time, at the same place when they're demanding the same. Because what is the other any reason for insurance at all. If I'm not getting the money on time, then why am I taking the insurance? Right? Even when we talk about the discounts, you see that you go to any XYZ websites right now, you will be getting 10%, 50% discounts on this kind of insurance policies. So what do you mean? If you are giving too many discounts, you are diluting the quality of the product. And if you are actually diluting the quality of the product, you are actually going through various cost-cutting techniques, such as not giving claims, such as not giving the agent sometimes the money. So these are all the things that, or say the malpractices that are going on. Apart from this, we have some other issues also. For example, say technological adoption is quite low in the country. We need to use more AI. We need to use more amount of machine learning to detect the various transactions, to actually help understand, gather data from this sector. We also have to reduce the fraud and the mis-selling provisions generally done by various agents and the companies. We also need to take care of the healthcare inflation, because just in the name of healthcare inflation, insurance premiums also goes up sometimes. The prices of insurance premium goes up. So that is why we have to also look at broader healthcare reforms too, not only looking at the insurance sector as a whole. And at the end of the day, there are various other macroeconomical factors too. Factors such as inflation, factors such as wars, crises, and all those things, they also impact this sector. That is why the best way forward here are discussed. Firstly, we have to actually talk about increasing the digital insurance, because it is actually very easy for the people to sign up and get insurance for their own selves, for their families or their companies. We need to have all the companies as a mandatory provision to spread digital insurance directly on their websites, on various other applications. Next, we have to implement the insurance policies that we have, for example, in so many government policies in letter and spirit. Right? So you will be getting the details of these policies in your handout. But what I'm trying to say is that this benefit should be trying to trickle down to the lowest strata of our population. Also, we cannot ignore the role of insurance. There are emerging types of insurance such as cyber insurance. You have to attempt the question which is following up in the next slide here, and we have to try to popularize them. Going forward, we will be having so many risks related to cyber products, artificial intelligence. So that market should also be developed where the startups can actually benefit. Also, we must be trying to promote micro insurance, which is actually on the rise right now, if you can see. And at the end of the day, we also need to involve what we know as a parametric insurance. That means whatever the damages are, right, we must be trying to calculate them at the earliest. And here, any disaster related insurance must be having high priority, for which the government also has various frames and rules and various standards. These companies should be following the same here. So that is how we have come to the end of this topic here. Please do attempt this PYQ and let me know what is the answer. This is actually a very important PYQ based on your common sense on how we can actually include the various services within the cyber insurance sector. You can actually take the help of this diagram. And finally, also try to attempt this mains question regarding the insurance sector. For help, you can use this kind of information for your introduction or as a presentation in your answers. Now we'll be moving on to the simplified section. Guys, the NALSA has launched some initiatives for defense personnel and their families. This is very important when we talk about the various welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population. Mainly when we are talking here, we are talking it from the perspective of legal aid in the country. You know that like everything in the country, starting from health, education, transport and various other services, we have to always understand one thing, that whoever has the most money, that person can afford these services better. That is why via the constitutional articles of 39A, article 14 and 22 subclause 1, which you mentioned, what are these in the comments below. According to this, we need to have some legal protection and legal aid for the marginalized section of the population. That means that, for the poorer sections of the population, we need to give them free legal help. So according to the Legal Services Authority Act of 1987, we have the NALSA authority. And here we have various beneficiaries who will be receiving free legal aid. For example, women and children who are facing instances from domestic violence, child custody cases, or SC/ST communities, disabled persons, industrial workers, prisoners, human trafficking victim, disaster victims, and also low income groups who are having annual income less than 1 lakh rupees in cases of general courts. In cases of Supreme Court, this goes up to 5 lakh rupees. So this means that these people are actually belonging to the poorer sections of the population, marginalized sections, and that is why they need help. They need some affordable help. And when we talk about the legal sector, it is actually very, very expensive if you want to get speedy justice. And any kind of justice delayed is justice denied, as simple as that. And that is why NALSA helps those people in so many ways. Firstly, they give, most importantly, the free legal services. When we talk about the fees that you need to pay to the lawyers for drafting, for translations, for affidavits, for even getting the court order in case you want it in your favor, these all are actually very, very costly, extremely costly. And this is how this particular service is letting the people gain access to the legal services. Next, under this act, we also have the provisions to operate the Lok Adalats, which are actually a very, inclusive way of giving legal services, free and, a fair kind of legal resolution of any disputes related to divorce, property disputes to the people. Next, this also is actually letting us have various legal awareness programs such as workshops, TV programs and so on to actually spread more and more awareness between the people. Next, when we talk about victim compensation, we have to give financial aid for rape survivors, acid attack victims, families of custodial torture victims. So this is how they need compensation, and this is actually letting them do so. Also, the NALSA is very instrumental in filing various public interest litigations in the interest of public, so that actually some issues where people, for example, do not have the resources and the money to fight legal battles, they are taking on those battles. For example, take the case of NALSA versus Union of India 2014, which is actually a very landmark case when we talk about the rights of the transgenders in the country. So they actually fought on their behalf. And at the end of the day, we have to understand how it is all coming into picture. Basically, on the various important funds, the central government will be contributing, and based on the salaries that you need to pay to various peoples here involved, so you have to take the same from the state governments. Now, when we talk about the various other government initiatives for free legal aid, generally we have an overarching scheme which is known by the name of Designing Innovative Solutions for Holistic Access to Justice in India, under which we have a Nyay Bandhu platform and digital platform. If you need legal help, you can go there and get the same. Also, we have a tele law service where expert lawyers and legal professionals are present at your help. Also, we have the Legal Aid Defense Council system. This system will be giving you lawyers, giving you actually kind of consultations, even for mediation and various other alternate dispute resolution processes. At the end of the day, we also have the Nyay Mitra program to spread awareness. Apart from that, we also have to celebrate the Legal Services Day to spread awareness of this kind of programs. Guys, now let me tell you about the recent scheme which has been launched by the NALSA, which is actually talking about giving financial support for legal aspects related to armed forces personnel, paramilitary forces and their families. So they will be actually be getting the legal clinics, where this will be set at various Sainik boards, at various Zilla, Rajya and Kendra level, right? Also, we will be having various paralegal volunteers. These are actually retired defense personnel, right? And their families who will be getting the help of these paralegal volunteers to get the help of some people who are actually not professional lawyers and so on, but they can actually help this kind of people. Also, the legal clinic will be supporting in cases of any property dispute, family issues, pension, utility bills, etc. So that they do not have to worry, because they have served our country for a long period of time, and let us help them in this particular matter. Next, they can also get remote legal access. How? They can actually have various legal support for Jawans in border areas who cannot attend the courts physically. So for them, some telecommunication factors will be enabled. And at the end of the day, legal awareness is also a very, very important factor. And here, the education will be given to the soldiers and their families to spread awareness of this particular scheme. Next, guys, we have two PYQs here from prelims. Here, one is from 2013, one is from 2021. So here, you let me know what is the answer, because we have just discussed this, and I've told before also it is extremely important to practice the PYQs. Let us move on to the next one. Guys, in a very tragic incident at a school in Rajasthan, there were 7 children who were killed due to a roof collapse. This is pointing us or our attention to the very sorrow affair of the schools in our country, mainly the government schools. And that is where, from the perspective of GS2 and 3, where we have the topics of the issues related to management of social services related to education, and also from the perspective of disaster management, we have to understand what is the main issue here. Firstly, look at these young children. They have lost their lives just by studying at a government school, because the government schools or various other schools or institutions in the country, they do not have proper infrastructure to help and support these children and also their futures. We have heard about so many instances where teachers do not even come to school. If they come, they do not know what to teach. If they are teaching the wrong stuff. There are so many videos on YouTube where you can find the teachers who do not even know ABCD, who even do not know basics of Hindi or various other language or science or history. They are teaching all the wrong stuff. That is a teacher side issue. But when we talk about the infrastructure, when we talk about the buildings, when we talk about the toilets, when we talk about the various rooms, the blackboards, which are the very basic things in a school, these are also lacking. And this is exactly what has resulted into this incident right now. Now, if I can show you some report released by the UDIAC plus, actually it is from the 2023-24. It is talking about the status of school infrastructure in the country. It went on to study so many schools, around 14.71 lakh schools all across the country. Generally, this is looking at the various financial data and the infrastructure data. It is looking into all of the important details of the school, and it has collected some information that in India, out of around 14 lakh schools in the country, around 1.5 lakh do not have electricity. So imagine those schools not having any fans, not having any tube lights, proper electrical facilities. 24,580 schools lack drinking water entirely. So imagine the conditions in that school, right? Also, 67,000 of the school function without working toilets. Imagine the condition of the students during the school hours. 77% have ramps. Ramp is actually an elevated platform, generally extremely useful for disabled children, because they cannot actually walk up the stairs or walk down the stairs, and they need ramps. Only 77% of the schools have, where 100% of the schools must be having the same. It is such a basic thing to do. Just construct a ramp. And even if the schools are having ramp, only 52% have ramps like this, if you can see here, with railings, proper hand rails. This means that many schools in the country are not exactly disabled friendly. At the end of the day, 40% of the schools also operate without fire safety protocols. So this is actually out of my imagination. When I am looking at these infrastructural reports, you will be more amazed when you find the other things too. When we talk about the technology and labs, right? We lack computers in 50% school. We do not have dedicated art and crafts room in more than, say 70% of the schools, right? We have science labs only in 1.6 lakh school out of 2.8 lakhs. Also, when we talk about the adoption of renewable energy, only 10% of school, mainly the private schools, are adopting the renewable energy. And if you can recollect the schools who are not having any electricity, they can easily have the same by using government funds, but they do not have. And government schools have only 8% or 9% when we talk about solar panels installed. Also, the various other aspects, for example, say the single teacher schools have declined over a period of time. It was actually at 1.1 lakh schools, right, in 2023-24, but it has declined. That means schools who are having single teachers are less in the country right now. That is actually a good thing. But in those schools where this has declined, the student enrollment has fallen, because the parents are not confident to send the students to those schools earlier where there were not teachers. Imagine this yourself. Also, the zero enrollment schools has actually increased, right? And the more number of schools are actually in UP, West Bengal and so on. Also, when we talk about, the other facilities apart from toilets and so on, when we talk about, computer, internet, kitchen garden, rainwater harvesting, if you see all of the skills, or say the playground, all of these things are lacking here. So this is where we have to understand that recently the center has told that there must be mandatory safety audit in the schools right now. And this is where the center has recommended 4-pillar strategy, extremely important for disaster management. Firstly, the schools need to look into the structural integrity. Emergency drills must be conducted. Transparent reporting via the various authorities must be done. And the mental well-being of the students must also be taken care of. So here, fire and electrical safety with reference to extinguisher exits have been streamlined. Emergency preparedness with reference to various drills and crisis protocols have been framed. Incident reporting within 24 hours has been mandated. Otherwise, the school, the teachers or the authorities will be facing legal issues. Also, accountability has been fixed using criminal charges for negligence. Just imagine about the parents of these children right now. So you can only understand whom to blame here. So this accountability must be framed. Criminal charges must be placed. Blacklist must be done with reference to the various contractors of the schools. Also, the schools must be having monsoon alerts. Using drones and AI, we should be trying to scan the school infrastructure and find out gaps and the various deficiencies that we need to fix, where human beings cannot go and inspect. Also, audits in these flood-prone zones must be also be done. Why the government is doing all of these things? Because the government has responsibilities with reference to some policies and frameworks. Firstly, you let me know in the comments what is the age for the right to education in the country, which is your fundamental right. Also, we have the National School Safety Policy Guidelines according to the National Disaster Management Act and the various guidelines from 2016. Also, we have the National Building Code, which is telling us how the building must be constructed, what kind of ingredients that must be going into the same. And also, we conduct so many school safety programs. That is all for this topic. Please do remember this and try to note the things down. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. The Delhi government has actually decided to go to the Supreme Court to review Supreme Court's earlier order on the ban of some kinds of vehicles in the capital region. This is very important from the perspective of prelims, climate change, and also GS3 from the perspective of environmental pollution and degradation. So, the government right now has actually come across this decision that it will be approaching the Supreme Court to challenge a 2018 order that actually talked about the end-of-life vehicles and phasing the diesel vehicles older than 10 years and petrol vehicles older than 15 years. So this is actually coming on the heels of the pollution and transport challenges in the country. And mainly when we talk about the pollution challenges in the capital region, we have to understand that out of the total local sources of pollution in Delhi, right, the total pollution is actually mainly attributed to the transportation sector. Correct? So this is how we have to understand 51% right here of the Delhi's local sources of pollution is actually coming from the, the transportation. This is where you have to understand the various sources of air pollution in the NCR. Firstly, there are instances of stubble and biomass burning during mainly the winter season, during which we have huge amount of air pollution. Next, we also have construction and road dust, right? We have the industrial emissions surrounding the areas of Lajpat Nagar. We have the areas of various instances of Noida. Along the entire Yamuna river, we have various industries. We also have too much of vehicles in the country, where you can see it is actually one of the main reasons, that is the transportation sector. Also, with reference to the various meteorological conditions such as the rain, even during the winter conditions where Delhi's air do not actually escape and the pollutants actually get trapped between the capital. These are the things that we have to keep in mind. So here, this is actually a 2020 prelims question, which is talking about what are the various reasons and factors for the exposure to the benzene pollution. So this actually has led the government of India to introduce so many initiatives to reduce vehicular emissions in the country. Firstly, we have emission standards right now. We have the Bharat Stage 6 standards right now, which look into reducing these pollutants. Also, some cities who are doing very innovative pollution control techniques have low emission zones where you cannot actually take vehicles, you can only take the clean and greener vehicles there. Also, we have to promote clean vehicle technologies, and that is why the government has also introduced the FAME scheme earlier, which has been now replaced by the PM E-Drive initiative, which is actually talking about popularizing the adoption of electric vehicles, not only the transport or say passenger vehicles, but also looking into the commercial vehicles, the ambulances, which must be running on clean energy. We also have launched the corporate average fuel consumption to reduce the overall emissions in the transportation sector, mainly via the trucking industry, the passenger bus industry, and so on. We also are thinking of increasing the ethanol blending. You let me know in the comments what is the target that India is having. Also, we have the Satat initiative, which is actually trying to innovate the compressed biogas here and having this as an alternate fuel to drive our cars and also have employment benefits in the future. On the other hand, we also have the green hydrogen initiative to convert renewable energy such as solar energy into producing hydrogen that can actually be used for cleaner energy in our transportation sector. Also, to reduce emissions, we are also having proper industrial and urban planning. For example, in Delhi, if you can see, we have so much of metro constructions. Also in various other parts of the country such as Kochi, we have the new metro rail developments which are coming up. Also, with reference to traffic management, walkable and cyclable infrastructure, mainly in some prominent areas of some cities, we are also trying to do the same. Also, addressing older vehicles via the vehicle scrappage policy, that is for corporate sector. Any vehicles above 15 years must be scrapped and you will be receiving some financial incentive. For the normal people like us, it is around 20 years. We also have to actually get the pollution under control certificates on a timely basis from the various petrol pumps, right? You must have heard about it, and that is why your pollution is actually looked at. Also, there are various other initiatives such as the National Clean Air Program, which is actually looking into transform around 131 cities in the country and reduce the air pollution there. Also, we have the graded response action plan. Based on the level of air pollution, we will be making more stricter regulations on the construction, industrial or vehicle activity in some cities. Also, we have the research and monitoring, which is done by the various organizations, mainly on the Commission of Air Quality Management in Delhi and various other state governments in the entire country. So this is where, the Delhi government right now is telling that as of now, the 2018 Supreme Court order told that some vehicles should not be allowed to operate based on the age of vehicles. But the Delhi government is telling that this should not be the only criteria. You should not be looking at age. You should be looking at what are the real world emissions by the PUC certificates. What is the mileage that vehicle is giving? If it is giving less mileage, that means it is trying to pollute more. Then what is the fitness test? What is the various retrofitting? For example, various cars can actually also run on the compressed gas. So we should not be only looking at, or say from the lens of the age of the vehicle. Also, since 2018, that is the order back then, that technology has changed. India has moved on to BS6, right? Also, we are having more amount of PUC certificates. We are having more number of monitoring right now. So Supreme Court needs to review that judgment. Also, the citizens can also face hardships because their cars based on the age will be taken by the government and they will be scrapped away. And this will be a very, very big blow to the low income people and only in Delhi. So the Chief Minister is also arguing why this is only taking place in Delhi. And at the end of the day, it is also demanding a systematic review from the union government by the Commission on Air Quality Management, which should be doing a scientific study in the capital. So this is where this topic ends, and now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, this is a recent statement by the Agriculture Minister where, he is telling that strict actions should be taken for the forced sale of nanofertilizers. Let us understand this issue. Firstly, let us understand what nanofertilizer is in the first place. See, these nanofertilizers and the biostimulants which the minister actually referenced in the article, these are not replacement of fertilizers. These are supplements. That means that with traditional fertilizers, you have to give the supplements. For example, the nano urea or say the nano DAP are actually fertilizers developed by nanotechnology. These have extremely small particle size and these are actually very efficient for the plants to uptake. Right? These fertilizers are not wasted. You can actually mix it in water and actually spray it on the crops themselves, and this can actually help the plant have better, say, growth over a period of time. Also, the various nutrients can be easily be uptaken because here the particles are extremely at the nanoscale. So easily it can be absorbed by the plants. So it actually reduces the overall uses of your traditional fertilizers. It cannot replace them, right? Also, the biostimulants are actually those plant materials such as seaweed or some acids such as humic acid which stimulate plant growth, increase your yields. Correct? But this no way will be replacing the traditional fertilizers. Now here guys, the government of India has from very long time has been trying to promote nano fertilizers in the country. Firstly, we have the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samriddhi Kendras, where these nano urea components are actually sold and nano DAP is sold to the farmers at cheaper rates. We also have the Namo Drone Didi initiative. This Drone Didi initiative is actually giving drones to various self-help groups in the country where the women can actually learn to operate the drones, and with that they can actually try to spray fertilizers, mainly the nano urea and the nano fertilizers, because they need extremely precise spraying on the crops. Also, we have the Maha Abhiyan campaign recently, which were actually trying to spread the usage of nano DAP in all 15 agroclimatic zones in the country, right? Also, the various PSUs such as the NFL, the RCF, right? These are also setting up various plants to manufacture this nano DAP and the nano urea. But here, there is a scheme which is going on, right? Now here, the government got to know the scheme, right? Because you can understand that there are various people in the country who will be reporting any kind of negligence, any kind of, say, inefficiencies to the government. So what the farmers' body complained to the government is that, there are some shops or there are some people who sell traditional fertilizers, but with this, they also try to fool the farmers by bundling this sale with nano fertilizers. These shopkeepers tell the farmers that this is a very, interesting scheme. You can take the benefits here. You take more of nano urea, you take more of nano DAP. It is good for your soil. It is good for your plant. But at the end of the day, it is just a scheme which, zor zor ke sabko bataya gaya, right? Here, the government got to know about this scheme, and this is actually an illegal practice because you cannot bundle the fertilizers in this way. Because already the fertilizers are subsidized, and if you are trying to bundle and increase the price to the farmers, it is actually putting a financial burden. It is violating the farmers' rights, and that is why this kind of action must be taken. For example, any person who is involved in this, legal action should be taken, cancellation of the licenses, also FIR must be registered. So actually, when we have to understand this from the perspective of legal and regulatory framework, according to Fertilizer Control Order of 1985, you cannot sell substandard fertilizers in this way. You will be punished with your license being cancelled or FIRs being registered. Also, the Essential Commodities Act of 1955 is extremely important, and among the various other items in this act, which you can mention in the comments, we also have the fertilizers. So the states are actually encouraged to prevent black marketing, overpricing, and also diversion of subsidized fertilizers to other uses. So that is why this is a very big deal. This kind of fertilizers are being bundled and sold to the farmers. So this is a burden for them. For one bag of urea, which was earlier around 242, right now the same bag is now bundled with nano urea and being sold at 600 rupees per liter. This is why we have to keep this in mind. And also, there has been various instances where some fake fertilizers being sold is a rumor, is a report which are coming out. So this is all for this one. Now let us practice again 2 PYQs. You let me know the answers in the comments below. We'll be now moving on to the last article. Here in this article, we have one award, which is actually the Sansad Ratna Awards, because we need to know about the various current events of national importance and international importance. And also from GS2 perspective, this article can actually be a very case study which you can actually incorporate in your mains answers when we talk about rewarding some parliamentarians who are doing good work. So this is actually an award which was instituted by Dr. Abdul Kalam, right? It was actually launched in 2010, and the main objective is to award those MPs and the committees for their excellent work. You know, the very health of a democracy is actually how their parliament is functioning, and that is why a jury will be there where eminent parliamentarians will be present, civil society members will be present, and the data from the PRS Legislative Research, which you may have heard, is an excellent website for any bill or details related to some legislations. So based on this, they will be having a criteria for selection based on number of questions an MP has asked, a number of private members bill that member has introduced, or the participation in debates that particular MP has done, and also the attendance in parliament and the uses of MP-led funds for the local development. So all of these factors will be constituted, looked into, and finally these MPs have been awarded this award. 17 MPs as of now. You do not need to know their names, but you need to know this kind of detail for your prelims examination. So that's all for today. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. This was a long discussion. I hope you found it useful, and please do attempt the quiz which is following up. All the best and best of luck till we meet again. Thank you.